Now, you might want to get a cup of tea and sit down because I tell you, I've got a lot to say because today the media is yet again filled to the brim with more leaks of parties during lockdowns. Now, if you're somebody who wants all the details, you will find them pretty much everywhere. They're on every single news website, in every paper, and on every TV channel, back to back. The details are all there in minute detail. But if you'll forgive me, I'll spare you that and tell you the short version. It's basically details of more parties, gatherings, work dues, call them whatever you want. They've been leaked again today. This time, civil servants, and shock, horror, and even worse for some people, on the eve of Prince Philip's funeral. The media has predictably gone into overdrive. The images of that heartbreaking scene of the Queen alone at her husband's funeral and an apology issued by Number 10 to the Queen. Now, my heart breaks for anybody whose loved ones were forced to die alone, for those who couldn't attend a funeral, for those who had to give birth alone or couldn't visit loved ones. The list, of course, goes on. I myself, in fact, was hospitalised for a month during this pandemic and denied a single visitor. It was one of the hardest experiences of my life and one which continued when my baby was in intensive care for weeks and I was forced to be there alone without any support because of the rules. Many of these rules were inhumane. There is no other word for it. To hear then that those in charge broke the rules that they helped set creates an anger, and it's one that I fully understand. But what's happening in the media goes beyond that. This isn't just about gatherings or rules. This is, in my view, a systematic takedown of a Prime Minister. But for me personally, I do not appreciate the hypocrisy of media outlets revelling in this situation when many of their journalists broke the rules too. The Sun newspaper, for example, is frequently critical of Partygate, yet it turns out today that one of the parties, on the eve of Prince Philip's funeral, was for the PM's former Director of Communications, a man who is now the Deputy Editor of The Sun. He has, of course, apologised, but the hypocrisy is astounding. And it's not just the media, by the way. The opposition party, desperately seeking sad stories to share that relate to the date of the parties. But they don't share these stories out of sympathy to those affected. They do it, of course, to try and land blows on the government, because they have become so weak that the only gains that they can make are not due to their own strengths, but due to the weakness of others. The hypocrisy, of course, is that Labour voted for the rules which caused this suffering and would probably have gone a lot further too. And do not get me started on why these things are being leaked. Do not be fooled. It is not because of an upset re-rule breaking. This is personal vendettas being served. Revenge, some might call it. But what I call it is manipulation. Our understandable anger at some of the inhumane rules and the fury that those who set them but didn't follow them is being leveraged for people to score points. And I wish it would stop. For if we're going to have these conversations, we should also be asking, who is leaking this stuff? Why is there so much info and content being leaked from government buildings, for example? Do you remember that Hancock CCTV link? Ooh, I tell you, I will never unsee that. But why, though, should our news agenda be hijacked like this for personal vendetta, especially at a time when there is so much else that we should be focused on and progressing with? Now, as I said right at the start, what we're seeing here is a systematic takedown of a Prime Minister. And as to whether or not that is justified, I'll leave you to be the judge. I'm sure that there'll be very many different opinions, and rightly so, because that is, of course, the beauty of a democracy.